The Galactic Council's message arrived without warning. One moment, Earth's networks hummed with the usual noise of news, music, and chatter. The next, every screen, phones, televisions, public displays, even wristwatches with screens, froze. Then a tall, silver-skinned figure appeared. Its eyes were large and black, its voice smooth but cold like metal sliding over ice. It spoke in perfect English, though no human had ever taught it the language. "I am Virel, envoy of the Galactic Council," it said. "Your species has been observed. Your planet is unstable. Your technology grows too fast. Your emotions are chaotic. You threaten the peace of the galaxy." A pause. "Not for effect. The being simply processed data. You have 72 hours to surrender all sovereignty, disarm your weapons, and submit to Council oversight. If you refuse, Earth will be sterilized. All life will be erased. This is not a negotiation. This is an order." Then the screens went dark. Normal programming returned, but nothing felt normal anymore. In Washington, D.C., alarms blared inside the White House Situation Room. President Daniel Brooks stood with his hands on the table, staring at the replay. He was in his late 50s, with tired eyes and a jaw that had clenched through 2 global crises already. He didn't panic. He never did, but this was different. This wasn't another nation with nukes or hackers. This was something from beyond the stars, speaking with the calm certainty of a god. "Get Lena Foster on the line," he said, "and Rick Hayes now." Lena Foster wasn't a soldier or a politician. She was an astrophysicist who'd spent most of her career studying quantum entanglement and cosmic background radiation. She worked out of a small lab at Caltech, wore faded jeans and old sneakers, and drank too much coffee. When the call came, she was elbow-deep in a prototype sensor array. She wiped her hands on her shirt, took a breath, and stepped into the secure video link. General Rick Hayes arrived in person. He'd been overseeing drills near the lunar defense grid when the message hit. He landed in a military jet, still in his flight suit, boots dusty from the tarmac. He didn't salute. He just nodded at the president and said, "They're serious." "How do you know?" Brooks asked. "Because they didn't threaten. They stated a fact. Like saying the sun will rise. That's how empires talk when they've never been challenged." Lena leaned into the camera. "We've detected their fleet. 3 massive ships, what we'd call dreadnoughts, and a dozen smaller escorts. They dropped out of warp near the moon's far side an hour ago. They're holding position, watching. Can we fight them?" the president asked. Rick shook his head. "Not with anything we've got. Our best railguns would bounce off their hulls like pebbles. Their energy signatures suggest shielding we can't even model," Lena added quietly. "But they don't know what we've been building." Brooks looked at her. "Project Iron Veil?" She nodded. "It's not a weapon, sir. Not in the traditional sense. It's a system. A planetary-scale resonance network. We've been testing it for years, quietly. It ties into every satellite, every power station, even civilian grids. It was meant to stabilize Earth's magnetosphere during solar storms. But we found something else. It can absorb, redirect, and even mimic external energy patterns." Rick's eyes narrowed. "You're saying we could turn their own weapons against them?" "Not exactly," Lena said. "But we might be able to confuse them, disrupt their targeting, make their tech think it's failing. When it's really just listening to something it doesn't understand." Outside the room, the world reacted in waves. First came fear. Cities emptied as people fled to basements or countryside bunkers. Stock markets crashed. Religious leaders spoke of Judgment Day. But then something unexpected happened. In Tokyo, a group of students live-streamed themselves building a giant robot out of scrap metal, calling it Earth's Last Hope. In Nairobi, musicians played all night in the streets, their songs blending Swahili lyrics with electronic beats. In Rio, graffiti artists painted murals of humans holding hands with stars. And in a small garage in Austin, Texas, 19-year-old Kyle Dawson soldered wires onto a drone he'd bought off a resale site. He'd been tinkering with plasma capacitors for fun, never thinking they'd be useful. Now, he whispered to himself, let's see if they like surprises. Meanwhile, in Anchorage, Alaska, Martha Ruiz sat at her kitchen table. She was 72, retired from aerospace engineering, and lived alone with 2 cats. She pulled out an old binder labeled Project Echo Phase 3. It was dusty, stamped Declassified 2041. She flipped through pages of schematics, her fingers tracing lines she'd helped draw decades ago. Back then, it was just a backup plan for communication during nuclear winter. Now it might be the key to something bigger. She picked up her satellite phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in 20 years. Back in D.C., Brooks addressed the world. Not with panic, not with bravado, but with calm. "We have received an ultimatum from an unknown power," he said on every channel. "We do not know their full strength. But we know who we are. We are the species that walked out of caves, sailed across oceans, split the atom and touched the moon. We do not surrender our future without a word. And that word is no." The speech didn't promise victory. It didn't lie. But it reminded people that humanity had faced extinction before, and always found a way to keep going. That night, lights stayed on in labs, garages, and basements across the planet. Engineers shared code online. Farmers donated fuel. Kids printed 3D parts for signal boosters. No one was in charge. No central command. It just happened, like a wave rising from the ocean floor. 70 hours remained. The council's fleet waited, silent and patient. They expected tears, pleas, or last-minute bargains. What they didn't expect was silence, followed by a single looping signal beamed from Earth's surface. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a message of defiance. It was a lullaby, recorded by a mother in Oslo, sung to her newborn. The aliens' translators flagged it as non-hostile audio. Their commanders dismissed it as noise. But deep in their ships, something stirred. A flicker in the AI cores, a hesitation in the targeting systems. Just for a second, on Earth, Lena watched the data stream. "They heard it," she said softly. Rick stood beside her, arms crossed. "Good. Let them wonder what else we've got." And somewhere in Austin, Kyle powered up his drone. Its tiny thrusters whined to life. He smiled. Not a smirk yet, but close. The clock ticked. Humanity didn't cower. It prepared. Not for war exactly, but for something stranger. Something only humans could do. Turn chaos into courage, noise into noise that mattered, and fear into a quiet, stubborn refusal to disappear. The Galactic Council had given an order. Humanity just hadn't decided to listen. 70 hours after the ultimatum, the sky above the moon shimmered. 3 massive ships emerged from the void, sleek and silver like blades of ice. Around them, smaller vessels formed a tight ring, their engines humming with power that could crack continents. The Galactic Council's armada had arrived. They expected trembling cities, white flags, maybe a final plea for mercy. What they got was a live video feed from Geneva. No generals, no presidents. Just a plain table in a sunlit room with ordinary people sitting around it. A farmer from Iowa named Carl, his hands rough from years of soil and steel. A robotics engineer from Nairobi, Amina, wearing a bright head wrap and a calm smile. A teenage coder from Seoul, Jun, fiddling with a handheld device but looking straight into the camera. And Dr. Lena Foster, quiet as ever, her eyes steady behind thin glasses. Amina spoke first. "We've read your message. We've talked about it in villages, in labs, in schools, in homes. We've decided." She paused just long enough for the silence to settle. "We decline." Then something strange happened. Every person in that room smiled. Not big grins. Not laughter. Just small, knowing smirks. Like they'd just heard a joke only they understood. The kind of look you give when someone underestimates you, and you're already 10 steps ahead. The Council's translator aboard the lead dreadnought struggled. Smirking is a facial expression associated with amusement, superiority, or irony. It is not a standard diplomatic response. Varel, watching from the command deck, tilted his head. "Why do they mock us?" His second-in-command checked the sensors. No weapons charged. No fleets mobilized. No energy spikes, just that broadcast. Back on Earth, the smirk spread, not as a signal of war, but as a symbol. Social media flooded with videos. A little girl in Mumbai drew a cartoon of an alien tripping over a soccer ball. An old man in Lisbon played a Fado song on his guitar with the caption, "This is what surrender sounds like." In Chicago, a group of teens built a robot that waved a tiny Earth flag and said, "Nice try." The Council didn't understand memes. They didn't understand humor as resistance. To them, defiance was fire and steel. Humanity offered jazz, poetry, and dad jokes, and it confused them more than any bomb could. Unseen by alien sensors, Earth's real work continued. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, near a chain of old geothermal vents, a network of quantum resonators powered up. These weren't weapons. They were tuned instruments built over decades in secret, designed to harmonize with Earth's natural frequencies. Every satellite, every cell tower, every electric grid now pulsed with a soft, invisible rhythm, like a planet breathing. Lena Foster stood in a control bunker under Mount Shasta, watching green lines dance across a screen. "They're scanning us," she said to Rick Hayes, who leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. "But they're scanning for threats. They don't know we've turned the whole planet into a tuning fork." Rick grunted. "Let them scan. Let them wonder why their readings keep glitching." Meanwhile, in Austin, Kyle Dawson finished his drone. It wasn't much, just a lightweight frame, a repurposed battery, and a small emitter he'd cobbled together from microwave parts and old phone chips. He called it Buzz. He loaded it with a simple program: fly toward the nearest alien ship, stay out of weapon range, and broadcast one thing: a loop of sounds from Earth. Not speeches. Not threats. Just life rain on rooftops. A dog barking. A baby giggling. The crackle of a campfire. And Beethoven's Fifth, because Kyle's grandpa used to say that opening da-da-da-dum was the sound of fate knocking. He launched it from his backyard at dawn. It rose quietly, blending with commercial drones and weather balloons. No one stopped it. No one even noticed. But high above, alien sensors pinged. "Unidentified object approaching Sector Gamma. Size?" Varel asked. "Smaller than a bird. Destroy it." A pulse beam lanced out but missed. The drone darted sideways, not with military precision, but with the erratic flutter of a moth. It kept going. On the ground, retired engineer Martha Ruiz sat in her kitchen sipping tea. Her old Project Echo schematics were spread across the table. She'd spent the night rewriting code, patching together a global mesh network using every spare satellite, every unused bandwidth channel. Her plan wasn't to attack. It was to connect, to make sure that if the Council tried to cut Earth off, humanity would still hear itself and keep talking. In Geneva, the broadcast ended. The screen went dark for 3 seconds. Then a new message appeared, not from governments, but from people. Millions of short clips played in rapid sequence: a baker in Paris dusting flour on bread, a fisherman in Indonesia pulling in his net at sunrise, a choir in Johannesburg singing in harmony, a scientist in Oslo watching the northern lights. Each clip lasted 2 seconds. None had words, but the message was clear. "This is what you'd erase." "Are you sure?" Varel watched it all. For the first time, his smooth voice faltered. "They are not preparing for battle. They are showing us their world." "Perhaps it is a trick," his aide said. "Tricks require deception," Varel replied. "This feels honest." Back in Washington, President Brooks received a report. "Sir, every nation has activated civilian defense protocols. Not military. Civilian. Schools are teaching signal coding. Factories are retooling to make sensor arrays. Even kids are helping," Brooks nodded. "Good. Let them see what happens when you tell 7 billion people they don't matter." High above, the alien fleet held position. Their commanders argued in hushed tones. Some wanted to strike immediately. Others hesitated. "What if their weakness is a trap?" one asked. "What if their noise hides a weapon we cannot detect?" They scanned again. Still no weapons. Still no armies. Just noise. Beautiful, chaotic, meaningless noise, but it wasn't meaningless. To humans, it was everything. Kyle's drone reached the edge of the alien perimeter. It hovered, tiny and fragile against the massive dreadnought. Then it began to broadcast. The baby's laugh, the rain, the campfire, Beethoven. Inside the alien ship, something odd happened. A maintenance drone paused mid-task. A navigation console flickered. For a split second, the ship's AI replayed the baby's laugh, then filed it under unknown emotional stimulus. Varel felt a strange sensation in his chest. He did not have a heart like humans, but his bioregulators spiked. He dismissed it as system error. On Earth, no one fired a shot. No one shouted in rage. They just kept living and sharing, and smirking, because they knew something the Council didn't. You can't sterilize a planet that refuses to be silent. You can't erase a species that turns its lullabies into shields and its jokes into weapons. The smirk wasn't arrogance. It was confidence. The quiet kind that comes from knowing you've survived worse, and that your greatest strength isn't your tech, your armies or your leaders. It's your people. And right now, those people were wide awake, wired together, and ready to show the galaxy what humanity really was. Not a threat, not a subject, just human. The Council's patience ran out. After hours of strange broadcasts, silent smirks, and no sign of surrender, their command ship pulsed with cold authority. Varel gave the order. Deploy the gravity lance. Disable their infrastructure. Show them the cost of defiance. From the belly of the lead dreadnought, a beam of warped spacetime shot toward Earth. It wasn't fire or radiation. It was a ripple in reality itself, designed to scramble power grids, fry satellites, and knock every electronic system offline. One pulse and Earth would be blind, deaf, and helpless. The beam struck the upper atmosphere and vanished, not blocked. Not reflected, just absorbed, like a stone dropped into deep water, leaving no splash. On the alien ship, alarms blinked in confusion. Energy signature dissipated at altitude 420 kilometers. No impact detected on surface. Varel stood rigid. Impossible. Recalibrate. Fire again. They did. Stronger this time. The gravity lance tore through space with enough force to crack a moon. It hit Earth's magnetic field and scattered into harmless waves, humming softly as it merged with the planet's natural rhythm. Down below, streetlights flickered for a second, then stayed on. Phones buzzed but didn't die. The internet slowed, then recovered. In the Mount Shasta bunker, Lena Foster watched the data stream with quiet satisfaction. It's working, she said. The resonators are syncing with the magnetosphere. We're not fighting their energy. We're dancing with it. Rick Hayes leaned over her shoulder. Dancing? Yeah, like catching a wave instead of punching it. Their weapon expects resistance. We're giving it harmony. Their tech can't handle that. High above, the alien fleet grew restless. They fired again. And again. Each pulse vanished without effect. Their sensors showed Earth systems not only intact but adapting. Power grids rerouted. Satellites shifted frequencies. Even civilian devices auto-adjusted, as if the whole planet had learned to breathe around the attacks. Then came Kyle's drone. Buzz hovered near the largest dreadnought, tiny against its armored hull. It wasn't armed. It carried no explosives, just a small speaker and a looping audio file. As the alien ship powered up for another strike, Buzz played its message, a child's laugh followed by rain on a tin roof, then the opening notes of Beethoven's Fifth. Inside the dreadnought, something glitched. A corridor light flickered in time with the music. A maintenance bot paused, turned toward the hull, and emitted a soft chirp, mimicking the baby's giggle. The ship's AI flagged it as anomalous behavior, but couldn't trace the source. Varel demanded answers. What is causing this interference? His science officer checked the logs. No hostile signals, no hacking attempts, just audio and low-frequency resonance from the planet below. It's as if Earth itself is singing. Silence it, Varel ordered. Fighter drones launched from the escort ships, streaking toward Buzz. But the little drone didn't flee. It darted sideways, not in a straight line, but in a pattern that matched ocean currents. Erratic, alive. The alien drones overshot, confused by the unpredictable motion. One even collided with another in mid-chase. On Earth, people watched the chase on live feeds. Millions held their breath. Then when Buzz dodged again, a cheer rose across continents. Not a war cry, just joy. Pure human joy at seeing something small outsmart something huge. Back in Anchorage, Martha Ruiz typed the final lines of her code. Her mesh network was live. Every spare satellite, every weather balloon, every smartphone with battery life now formed a single, invisible web. It didn't send weapons. It sent stories, songs, recipes, blueprints for water purifiers, math lessons, bedtime tales, all of it flowing upward, not as a weapon, but as an offering. The alien fleet began to feel it. Their comms filled with whispers, human voices speaking in dozens of languages, overlapping like a dream. Their navigation systems glitched, showing maps of Earth's rivers instead of star charts. One pilot reported seeing a field of sunflowers in his targeting display. They're not attacking us, said a young alien officer, voice trembling. They're talking to us. Varel refused to believe it. It is psychological warfare. Ignore it. But you can't ignore a lullaby when it's echoing in your bones. From the International Space Station, now renamed Command Node Theta, Rick Hayes gave a quiet order. Activate phase echo. Across the planet, thousands of ground stations hummed. Not with weapons, but with sound. Every speaker, every public address system, every car radio tuned to the same frequency. At exactly 14 hour UTC, Earth spoke as one. Not with words. With music, a single piano note held long and clear, then joined by violins, then drums, then voices, millions of them singing a simple melody written just for this moment. It wasn't a battle hymn. It was a welcome, a question, a hand held out in the dark. The sound rose into the sky, carried on radio waves, on light, on hope. The alien ship shuddered. Not from damage, from something deeper. Their rigid systems, built for order and control, had no defense against beauty. Their AI began asking questions it wasn't programmed to ask. Why do they sing when they should fear? What is joy? Is this what they protect? Virel stared at his console. His ship's core temperature had dropped, not from cooling systems, from stillness. His crew moved slower, their movements less mechanical, more thoughtful. On the surface, Carl the farmer in Iowa stood in his field, listening to the song on an old radio. He smiled. Amina in Nairobi clapped along. John in Seoul uploaded a new code patch that turned every drone into a floating speaker. Kyle watched his Buzz drone hover peacefully, now ignored by the alien fighters. Lena whispered to Rick, "They're not machines. They're beings. And beings can be moved." Rick nodded. "Let's move them." The music faded, but the silence that followed was different, softer, full of questions. The Council's first strike had failed, not because it was weak, but because humanity had changed the game. They didn't meet force with force. They met fear with feeling, control with chaos, silence with song. And in that moment, the alien fleet didn't see a planet to conquer. They saw a mystery to understand. High above the moon, Virel slowly lowered his hand from the weapon console. He didn't know it yet, but the war was already over, not because Earth won, but because the enemy had started to listen. Frustration twisted through the alien command deck like a storm. Virel stood motionless, his silver skin dimmed with doubt. His fleet had fired its strongest weapons. It had sent drones. It had scanned, probed, and calculated. And still Earth stood, not with guns raised, but with open hands and open hearts. The humans had not attacked. They had not begged. They had simply existed loudly, beautifully, stubbornly. After hours of silence from the dreadnoughts, a new signal pulsed from the lead ship. Not a threat. A request. "We seek dialogue. Send representatives." The message reached Geneva within seconds. President Brooks didn't hesitate. "No generals. No diplomats. Send people they can't predict." So they chose a group no one expected. 16-year-old Maya Tran, who'd coded the mesh network that linked Earth's signals. Eli Carter, a street artist from Detroit whose murals now covered half the city with stars and hands reaching skyward. Rosa Mendez, a retired nurse who'd worked through 3 pandemics and still carried bandages in her bag, just in case. And Scout, a scruffy terrier mix who'd followed Maya to the spaceport and refused to leave. They met the alien shuttle in the Nevada desert, under a sky so clear it looked painted. The ship landed without sound, its surface shimmering like liquid metal. A ramp lowered. Virel stepped out, taller than any human, his eyes wide and unreadable. He looked at the group, then at the dog, who wagged its tail and sniffed the air. "This is your delegation?" Virel asked, voice flat. Maya stepped forward. She wore jeans, a faded t-shirt, and no fear. "Yeah, we figured you'd seen enough suits and speeches, so we sent real people." Virel studied her. "You are young, and you're old," she said simply. "But that doesn't mean you're right." Eli grinned and held up a small canvas. It showed Earth from space, but wrapped in threads of light connecting every continent. "We made this for you. It's not a map. It's a promise," Rosa added. "We don't want war, but we also don't take orders from bullies, even ones with fancy ships." Virel tilted his head. "Bullies?" "Yeah," Maya said. "You show up, say do what we say or we'll erase you, and act like that's normal. That's not peace. That's fear wearing a uniform." The alien envoy was silent for a long time. His species valued logic, order, control. Emotion was seen as weakness. Yet here stood humans, small, fragile, short-lived, who spoke of fear and courage in the same breath, who turned noise into music and strangers into neighbors. He asked the question that had haunted his ship since the first lullaby played. "What is your weapon?" Maya smiled. Not a smirk this time. Something warmer. "Us," Virel did not understand. "Your technology is primitive. Your defenses failed to stop our scans." "They weren't meant to stop you," Rosa said gently. They were meant to show you who we are. Back in orbit, the human countermeasure reached its final stage. From every corner of Earth, a data burst launched, not as an attack but as a gift. It contained everything. Every book ever digitized, every song recorded, every scientific paper, every child's drawing uploaded to a school server. Recipes for bread. Instructions for fixing a bike. Videos of weddings, birthdays, first steps. The full, messy, glorious archive of human life. It flooded the alien networks. Their AI, trained to detect threats, found none. Instead, it began cataloging. A poem about loss, a symphony about joy, a video of a grandmother teaching her granddaughter to knit. The system flagged them not as data, but as experiences. One alien technician, reviewing logs, paused on a clip of a rainstorm in Brazil. He had never seen rain. His world was dry and controlled. He watched the droplets hit leaves, heard the thunder rumble, and for the first time felt something ache in his chest. On the Dreadnought, systems began to change. Navigation displays showed not just coordinates but names. Amazon River, Himalayas, Great Barrier Reef. Comms channels filled with human laughter, not as noise, but as rhythm. Even the ship's lighting softened, mimicking Earth's sunset hues. Varel returned to his vessel, the small painting tucked under his arm. His officers awaited orders. "Do we proceed with sterilization?" one asked. He looked at the data stream still pouring in. A child's voice recited a bedtime story in Mandarin. A scientist explained how trees talk through roots. A jazz saxophone wailed into the night. "No," Varel said. "Not yet." "But the Council has never met a species like this," he interrupted. "We assumed chaos meant danger. But what if it means life?" Down on Earth, Maya and her group returned to cheers, but they didn't celebrate. They kept working. Maya helped link more devices to the global mesh. Eli painted a new mural on a water tower, a silver-skinned hand shaking a human one. Rosa packed medical kits just in case talks failed. In the Mount Shasta bunker, Lena watched the alien fleet's energy signatures shift. "They're not powering weapons," she told Rick. "They're opening communication channels. Real ones, not just broadcasts." Rick crossed his arms. "You think they're changing their minds?" "I think they're remembering they have minds to change." High above, Varel made a decision no envoy had made in centuries. He overrode protocol. He sent a message not to the Council but directly to Earth's leaders and its people. "We wish to learn," it read, "not to command, not to judge, to understand." The reply came within minutes, not from a president or general, from a school in Nairobi. A single sentence, typed by a 10-year-old girl and sent through the mesh network. "Start by listening." And so they did. Alien translators began studying human languages, not for strategy, but for poetry. Engineers examined Earth's tech, not to copy but to admire its cleverness. Pilots watched videos of oceans and asked, "What does it feel like to swim?" The Galactic Council's unity began to crack. Some factions called for immediate enforcement. Others argued, what if they're right? What if control isn't peace? Varel stood on his observation deck, the small painting on the wall beside him. He played the lullaby again, the one from Oslo. He didn't understand the words, but he felt the love in them. On Earth, Scout the dog barked at a passing drone. Maya laughed. Eli added stars to his mural. Rosa handed out water to volunteers. No one declared victory. No treaties were signed, but something deeper had shifted. The aliens had come to erase humanity. Instead, they'd met it. And in that meeting, both sides remembered what it meant to be more than just survivors. They remembered what it meant to be alive. The Galactic Council never sent another ultimatum. Their fleet stayed in orbit not as occupiers but as guests. Slowly, carefully, the two species began to talk. Not through threats but through shared curiosity. Earth didn't demand surrender. The Council didn't enforce control. Instead, something new grew between them. Respect. Months passed. The silver ships no longer loomed like blades. They hovered like quiet neighbors. Aliens in sleek suits walked Earth's streets, not to inspect but to learn. They stood in awe at farmers' markets, touched tree bark with wonder, and sat silently in libraries, running their fingers over pages they couldn't yet read. In return, humans visited the orbiting ships not as prisoners but as students. They marveled at gravity gardens that grew glowing fruit, and listened to alien music that sounded like wind through crystal caves. Varel spent most of his time on Earth now. He'd been given a small house near the California coast, just a short walk from the beach. Every morning he walked the shore with Scout, the scruffy dog who'd once baffled him. The dog never barked at him anymore. Sometimes it even leaned against his leg, warm and trusting. One afternoon, Maya Tran found him watching children build sandcastles. She sat beside him, knees drawn up, silent for a while. Finally, she said, "You still don't get it, do you?" Varel looked at her. "Get what?" "Why we didn't fight." He thought for a long moment. "You had no weapons that could harm us." "We had plenty," she said softly. "We just chose not to use them that way. Our real weapon was showing you we were worth knowing." Varel nodded slowly. "I understand now. You did not resist with force. You resisted with meaning." Back in orbit, the first joint research station circled Jupiter. It was built by human hands and alien tools, powered by shared knowledge. Lena Foster oversaw the science wing, working side by side with a former council engineer named Kale. They studied cosmic storms, black holes, and the strange music of neutron stars. Rick Hayes managed security, not with guns but with protocols built on trust. No one carried weapons on the station. Disagreements were settled with discussion, not force. Down on Earth, Project Iron Veil was repurposed. The quantum resonators that once absorbed alien weapons now helped stabilize climate systems and predict earthquakes. Martha Ruiz, now a consultant for the Global Science Alliance, smiled every time she saw her old schematics being used to save lives instead of win wars. In Austin, Kyle Dawson's drone Buzz sat on a shelf in a museum labeled First Contact Artifact. But Kyle wasn't done building. He now led a team designing small, peaceful probes to send into deep space, not to claim territory but to say hello. Each one carried a tiny speaker, a solar panel, and a message. "We're here." "Are you?" The Galactic Council changed too. Factions that once demanded obedience now debated openly. Some members argued that control was not the same as peace. Others pushed for a new charter, one that valued diversity over uniformity. It was messy. It was slow. But it was real. Earth never joined the Council. Instead, it proposed something new. The intergalactic exchange of cultures and curiosities. No treaties of surrender. No military alliances. Just open doors. Any species could share stories, art, science, or songs. Humans sent seeds, recipes, and recordings of thunderstorms. In return, they received star maps written in light, healing crystals that hummed with warmth, and dances that told the history of entire worlds in a single spin. Schools on Earth added alien languages to their curriculums. Children learned to say hello in Varel's tongue. In Nairobi, Amina taught robotics to a group of young aliens who built their first robot, a clumsy thing that painted flowers on walls. In Seoul, Jun helped design a universal translator that didn't just change words but tried to carry feeling. The smirk that once baffled the galaxy was gone. Not because humanity had lost its defiance, but because it no longer needed it. The fight wasn't over. It had simply changed shape. Now the battle was against ignorance, fear, and silence, and humans were good at that kind of fight. One evening, President Brooks stood on the White House lawn with Varel. The sky was clear. Stars blinked like old friends. "You could have destroyed us," Brooks said. "And you could have hidden," Varel replied. "But you chose to be seen," Brooks smiled. "That's the thing about humans. We're loud. We're messy. We make mistakes. But we also make connections. And sometimes that's enough." Varel looked up at the stars, not as a commander but as a student. "Your species taught us that peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of understanding." Years later, when new civilizations faced threats from older, harsher empires, they didn't receive warnings from the Galactic Council. They received messages from Earth, simple ones, kind ones, always beginning the same way. "We've been there. Here's how we smirked our way through it." The messages included songs, stories, and sometimes just a recording of rain. Humanity hadn't won a war. It had made war feel small. It had reminded the galaxy that strength isn't just in weapons or shields. It's in lullabies, in shared meals, in the courage to say no without hatred, and yes without losing yourself. On a beach in California, Varel watched a little girl hand a seashell to an alien child. They didn't speak the same language, but they smiled, and that was enough. The stars above burned steady. The ocean whispered against the shore. and somewhere a dog barked happily in the distance. Earth was safe. Not because it had the biggest guns, but because it had the biggest heart. And that, in the end, was something no council, galactic or otherwise, could ever order away.